Yeah, I don't know where Heath is unless he's come in and we haven't let him in.
Don't see him yet.
Looks like Rita is in again, but she's
she's having audio issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I get her number? I could call her and see if I could help her out.
Well, that'd be great, Jody.
Do you have a phone number for her? I'll give her a call.
Do you have Teams up?
I do.
I'll send it over to you in Teams, and I'll let Rita know that you're going to be calling.
Perfect. I'm going to mute you guys. If you need me, keep.
Yeah, everyone else can go ahead and turn their camera off unless you're speaking. We're going to keep those off and muted on your mic. Thank you. Well, Nate, we'll hope that Heath shows up, or you're going to be wearing a whole lot of hats tonight.
Man, I just put them all away.
I'll open up the closet.
I just got that phone number and it went straight to voicemail. Just so I am trying to get a hold of her.
Okay, I let her know she might be trying to diagnose her own problems.
I'm the 990 number. I'll call
we'll let her.
her.
Okay.
Thank you.
John McConnell, you're all set, right? I don't know if I've heard. Did we check you already?
Yeah, I've been checked.
You've been checked. I just wanted to see, so you'll be sort of playing the sort of VJ, or I guess, I don't know what to call it, tonight, right? So you'll be, I can handle, I guess, it's going to be a bit different because we're going to do, the process where we let Ben Thurston go. He is going to speak. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that. He just emailed me about an hour ago. He's going to speak for the first 5 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to all the chat questions. And then I guess we'll have to go to the top of the list again and look for people who want to speak after we go through the chat. So we'll have to kind of keep track of what the last chat question was that we read in case people do more chats while we're doing the verbal. So that's the only part I can see getting confusing. So you guys can help me out. I'll try to do it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense for me, Nathan.
Okay. Hello. Sorry.
And real quickly here, Nathan, in regards to Ben Thurston, at your cue, I will unmute him. I'm not going to move him over. I will unmute him and let him speak, and then I will mute him again.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I'll let you be in charge of the muting, unmuting.
I will.
You and John. Okay. Yeah, and then I guess we'll just have to do that for each speaker who wants to speak.
That's no problem.
We only have like 6 people in here tonight. Oh, there's a couple more, so maybe we'll get. I spoke too soon.
Who starts the broadcast?
I have the button on my screen. If
I do too. I just want to make sure that I don't click it and somebody does and stuff. So I'm ready to go when you guys are.
Nathan, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started with tonight's meeting, to our second neighborhood meeting, rather, to discuss the Jeidinger Villas Lot 1 official development plan. My name again is Nathan Lawrence. I'm a senior planner with the city, with the Community Development Department. I'll be presenting an overview of the applicant's proposal, and we'll outline the steps and development process as we move forward. Will Gabler is the project architect, and he'll be speaking after my presentation on behalf of the property owner, Mr. Gormad Dorji. So before we begin, just some reminders about some etiquette with the virtual engagement. Please keep your comments courteous and cordial. Just remember that the most productive conversation we can have starts with respect. Questions and comments will be read aloud to the audience along with the name of the person that made that question or comment. So keep that in mind. And please keep your questions and comments relevant to the application that's being considered tonight. If you have any other questions about anything else, of course, we're here to help. We have an email up there, which is planning@cityofwestminster.us. And you can send any other questions there and they will be answered. And then for more information, you can, on the city's social media commenting policy, you can visit our webpage. It's pretty easy to find. So here's tonight's agenda. We'll try to do a quicker presentation for those of you who were here last month. No more than 15 minutes. We do need to give an overview of the project in case there are folks here that weren't in attendance last time. But we will also review some of the major findings of the first meeting. We'll follow the presentation with questions and comments, just like we did last time, and wrap up with an explanation of what happens next. And again, just a reminder, the meeting will end promptly at 8. So questions and comments, a little bit different tonight. So throughout tonight's presentation, like last time, please enter your comments into the chat box. We got a lot of comments last time, and the response was created and included in a summary that was sent to everyone who participated in the meeting. We understand that there might be some folks here tonight or joining us later that weren't at the first meeting, so we understand if there might be some redundant questions. That's fine, but you know, if you were here and a question was already asked, please refrain from asking those questions again, and you can always reference that summary sheet. Since we're holding a second meeting tonight, which isn't our norm, but we are doing it again to provide you all with an additional chance to provide input into our process, we will allow verbal commentary tonight. We'll start with allowing Ben Thurston 5 minutes at the beginning of the Q&A session to speak. We'll then go through all of the chat comments in order. And then once those are finished, then we'll sort of open it up to any verbal comments. So during the night, if you are during the course of the presentation or after, if you would like to speak aloud, then just type into the chat box, "I would like to speak," and we'll go in order after we go through all of the chat questions. Yeah, and that should cover that. So a little different tonight, but again, we'll let Ben go first, then chat questions, and then verbal. So go ahead and enter into the box if you'd like to speak, or just type in your question. All right, so we'll go through my pre-presentation again. I've tried to shorten it a bit, but I do want to go over the sort of base information here. The property owner is proposing to establish a meditation center in an existing building on the site that's located on the southeast corner of 106 and Balsam. And that's addressed at 8200 West 106th Avenue. Back in January 28th, 2020, City Council voted to approve the preliminary development plan. The PDP, as we'll be referring to it tonight, allowed for the establishment of a meditation center and also included setbacks, some restrictions on the size of buildings, and height restrictions. The PDP also sets some regulations for accessory uses such as parking, circumambulation path, a prayer wheel wall, and so forth. Here's an overview of our development review and permitting process. So we're now at the official development plan application stage here in the middle. We've gone through our first review by staff, which places us at the neighborhood meeting stage, which is where this always occurs. So the ODP, or the official development plan, is really the entitlement document that sets forth the specific site and building design standards, and really forms the basis for approval of building permits and civil docs. So again, we've completed the first review, which brings us to tonight's second neighborhood meeting. So again, with the ODP, we're starting to get into more fine grain, and we would like your comments on these items. So we're really talking tonight about trying to get feedback on site access, on the landscape design, parking lot design, site drainage and lighting, architecture and signage. You'll see some images in the applicant's presentation that will give you an idea of the project. Please keep your comments focused on these because these are the items that we need your feedback on and can influence the outcome of the final project. So I want to give a quick summary of the first meeting. So this last month, we really went through a great deal of input, and I thank you all who are here for your feedback. I've summarized a few of those items, and I'll just go through them. Again, just so we can continue to talk about fresh topics. So first off, only those development restrictions that are listed on the PDP are applicable to review of the ODP. A great deal of community input was received at the council meeting back in January 2020. It actually spanned 2 nights in order to accommodate all of the requests to provide feedback. At the end of the process, staff was not directed to add any stipulations to the PDP document, and it was approved by City Council as it was presented. Second, the city does not have a noise ordinance. There were some questions on that. Instead, complaints are handled sort of one-off based on if someone phones into the police to complain about them. Third, the temple use and meditation center use are both allowable uses per the PDP. Church use is what's stated on the PDP under the list of primary uses. But that was listed there because it matched the closest use that was listed on the comprehensive plan. But church use also means temple, and in this case also a meditation center. Fourth, the city has a very well-defined process for special events, but please be aware that there are other accessory uses that are associated with the principal use that are not subject to that process. That said, we are we've heard all of your input on that, and we will continue to work with the applicant to define the appropriate thresholds for when a special event permit is required, and based on the unique operations of this center. So again, we will take your comments into consideration as we go forward, acknowledging this is kind of new ground for us, and so we're going to weigh both the needs of the center and the community feedback on that. Fifth, a prayer wheel wall is allowed per the PDP. It can only be 10 feet tall. The meditation center building can also is limited to 30 feet in height, which includes the spire. So nothing will exceed that 30-foot height plane. And then finally, 21 off-street parking spaces are required by our code at minimum but the applicant is proposing to add extra spaces to better handle the parking demand. They can cover that in their portion of the presentation, which begins now. So Will Gabler is an architect who is going to present the owner's proposal for development of the center. Again, feel free to enter questions into the chat box while he's going through, just so that they stay fresh. And with that, I will turn it over to Will.
All right, thanks, Nathan. We'll just quickly kind of go through these. I think, most people here should be fairly familiar with the project by now, but just as a quick review, here's this slide's an aerial view showing the existing site. You can see 106th kind of at the top left, Balsam there at the bottom. Next slide. Another satellite view of the site with the existing buildings. You can see the single family home labeled number 2 there at the center. 4 is the former garage, which is remodeled and proposed to be the new location of the meditation center. Next slide. We wanted to kind of address some of the concerns that came up at last meeting, that some people felt like the project that was presented to City Council was substantially different than what we were presenting. So I just wanted to show those side by side so that people could see, the general size and scale and scope of the project is essentially the same, but as the process goes, at the ODP stage, we're asked to develop color and detail in the architecture to kind of present the character of that, and get public feedback on that. So this image is hopefully kind of shows that what we're presenting hasn't changed greatly from what we were showing at the City Council meeting. These images show kind of the next stage of development as we work with the city to kind of take it to the next level. Next slide. This is the proposed site plan. And we added some square footage calculations as they were requested last time, to show parking area. The existing 30 by 30 structure will not be enlarged, so that enclosed space will remain at 900 square feet. There's the addition of a covered deck, prayer wheel roof. It's roughly 1,500 square feet, and the path, the concrete path that will be supportive of that is roughly 2,500 square feet. The parking area, as it's currently laid out, is just under 7,000 square feet. As Nathan was saying, as we develop this with the engineered plan drawings, we were constrained within the setbacks. We may try to add a couple additional stalls, within those constraints, just so that we maximize the total number at that location, so that there's less need for any kind of overflow parking, which we'll discuss in later slides. And then we included just some general site area calcs, just to see the amount of development we're proposing in context of the overall site. Approximately 8% of the site, will be developed in terms of what's already existing, and including the proposed drive and parking area. So that leaves, approximately 92% of the site will be left as undeveloped field or landscaped areas. This is a way to get some context on, the scale of the development. Next slide. These are just some rendering views. We had some feedback about making sure that there's substantial evergreen planting with the buffer, which we'll be developing that with the landscape architect, just to ensure that that screenage for the parking area that is screened year-round. Next slide. Again, another view from 106th Avenue facing south. Next slide. And we're proposing a some kind of automatic gate at the entrance. This is just for reference, not necessarily this design, but something similar, just to control access after hours and that type of thing, and to create, kind of a more formal entry to the site and the project. Next slide. This shows, based on the kind of current Westminster signage code, the scale of site signage that's allowed for residential areas, that's restricted to 6 feet in height and a total area of 12 square feet. And we're proposing putting some sort of sign, maybe not this design, but something similar, to mark the entrance for visitors coming in. Next slide. This is a view from the parking area. You can see we're talking with the city. We'll kind of get into it a little bit more when we discuss drainage, but we're looking at various systems to control water on the site and mitigate site drainage. And we're looking at potentially using a permeable paver system for the parking lot as one of the strategies towards that end. Next slide. This is just a zoomed in view showing a little bit more detail of the prayer wheel wall. You can see the prayer wheels are copper cylinders there at the center. I think we kind of explained how those work. Just to reiterate, they're not intended and designed to make no sound, and they're used. People will be circumambulating along the path and spinning those as they circumambulate around the prayer wheel walls. Next slide. It's just a view of the interior court. This is kind of a sheltered, informal area that, as we work with the landscape architect, this will just be developed as kind of an informal gathering area for people. When weather's nice, they can gather or take breaks outside, between events at the retreats or whatever. Next slide. And this is, again, the view from the south. looking at the front of the meditation building, you can see the covered porch area and the front entry doors, the prayer wheel walls around the perimeter. Next slide. So I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the key neighborhood concerns that we heard at last meeting. Just, I think it's kind of been expressed, but just wanted to reiterate that, you know, we're working closely with the city and county engineers and looking at different strategies to mitigate site drainage. And our goal is to maintain or improve historical flow patterns to neighbors' properties. So our goal is that the development we do is an improvement to drainage on the property. And then in terms of neighborhood fit, you know, we've worked through this process with a lot of iterations on what we're proposing, and work with the planning officials to implement height limits and setbacks so that the scale and the scope of the project would be consistent with you know, the existing context of the neighborhood. And again, part of that results in a development that only impacts about 8% of the site, whereas that 92% of the site is left to you know, undeveloped fields or landscaped areas. And then, as I said before, you know, we'll be developing the specifics of that landscape buffer with our landscape architect, but will likely include earth berms and evergreen plantings just to ensure that the opacity and the screening of that screen will be maintained year round. Next slide. And so as the previous slide that showed kind of the entry signage, there was a lot of feedback that the neighbors typically weren't interested in the larger kind of arch entryway. And so we're taking that off the table for now. And so that any signage that were proposed will be conform to those requirements for residential areas, as I indicated before. So we're talking to the city about overflow parking. You know, there's lots of concern about parking and potentially people parking on 106th. And our strategy is to concentrate all our parking kind of in the area we indicated. If we can squeeze a couple more spots in there just to increase the capacity for parking there, we'll do that. And then our strategy for any overflow parking will be directed within the parking setbacks from the PDP within that area on the western part of the site will be dedicated for any kind of overflow parking if that arises. And so in terms of road improvements, we're working closely with Jefferson County in conversations about what improvements they'd like to see for both 106th Avenue and Balsam. And so our last conversation, they said they would like to see some type of sidewalk on the, adjacent to our property along both 106 and Balsam Street. And we're talking to them about the appropriateness of perhaps using a kind of more informal path to satisfy that requirement rather than a concrete sidewalk. But we're still kind of fleshing that out with them to see what's appropriate. I think that's my last slide.
All right, thank you, Will. So we'll shift into Q&A. We were going to start with allowing Ben Thurston to speak. So Jennifer, can you unmute Ben, and we'll allow him to speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll turn back to the chat comments. We have quite a few that have come in already.
Sure, Nathan. Mr. Thurston, you are allowed to speak.
Oh, there we go. Now it's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure
Ben.
can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nathan. First, I need to make it clear that my comments that I'm about to make are not meant to be an exhaustive list of neighbor concerns, and I certainly don't speak for all of the neighbors. Having said that, from my perspective, there are 3 broad categories of concerns by the neighbors regarding the proposed ODP. Number 1 is that the neighbors want the applicant to honor the representations he made during the public hearing for the PDP. These were provided to the city staff, but the response was, and you heard it tonight, that they could not be added to the PDP or ODP because council did not specifically make them conditions of approval. However, we have reviewed the statements made by council members just prior to the PDP vote, and we found that at least some of them relied on the applicant's representations to explain their vote in favor of the application. But it ultimately comes down to the applicant, and honoring these commitments is the right thing to do, and it's what someone does when they truly want to be a good neighbor. And I'm just going to run through them real quick. We asked these questions last time, but this is what, and we didn't make these up. We found these in the testimony during the public hearing. So they're written in the form of conditions. So the building shall have a maximum occupancy of 45 people. Number 2, accessory buildings shall be for residential use only and for church and not for church use of any type. Number 3, the parking lot for the church shall not exceed 17 spaces. We heard that from Nathan that 21 spaces at least are required, but I'm sure that the Westminster's code allows for adjustments to parking in one way or another, whether administrative or some kind of relief process to allow fewer if that is all that's needed. Number 4, the church may host a maximum of 5 retreats per year with a maximum attendance of 45 people per retreat. Again, we clearly heard that in the hearing. Number 5, any special event that is anticipated to exceed 45 people shall be conducted off-site. And number 6, the building shall have a maximum area of 1,000 square feet. That's already on the PDP, but to go on to say that the applicant represents that 1,000 square feet is adequate for its church program. Okay, so that's the first broad category, honor your commitments. Number 2, the county has identified 2 types of off-site improvements. First is the improvement of adjacent roadways. Second is the requirement to convey storm water to the nearest storm sewer or drainage way. The neighbors want to make sure that these issues are being addressed with this applicant in the same way that they would be addressed with any other applicant. We know the applicant has requested relief from the county for road improvements. The narrow roads and the fact that pedestrians are forced to walk in the road was talked about extensively in the public hearing. But now that there is a trail through the open space, the pedestrian activity has of course increased. When pedestrians are on the road, 2 cars cannot pass each other at the same time. There is a significant safety issue and it's growing. Ideally, the applicant should be required to improve their frontage to at least make the safety issues a little bit better. Regarding drainage, it appears that conveying stormwater to the nearest storm sewer or drainage way would be challenging for the applicant. What we thought we heard from the city's drainage engineer is that some kind of alternative is being considered that would not require the conveyance that Jefferson County says is required. It would be very helpful if both the city's engineer and the county's engineer would provide a direct answer to the question of whether or not the applicant will be required to convey stormwater off-site. And the third category is finally, at the last meeting, the applicant showed a number of new additions to his proposal that were not included in the PDP, most notably a few different options for a gateway to the property. The Westminster Code states that the city manager will decide if these changes constitute a significant change that warrants additional public hearings. The neighbors want to make sure that any of the changes they saw at the last meeting will require public hearings for approval of an amendment to the PDP. Again, that's the right thing to do, given the sensitivity of the neighbors, given what we went through in the public hearing, given that it was a split vote by council. For all those reasons, if there's changes, it really should go back to public hearings. And that's all I've got for you, Nathan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. I appreciate how organized you were in giving that. I was jotting down a few of these questions. I think some of them are were also asked in the, just looking ahead in the chat. So I'd like to kind of take a few of these and see if we can address them, or at least have a response to them. Again, you know, the purpose of this meeting is to collect your feedback. So you know, we can't answer exactly how everything is going to happen now. That's why we're holding this meeting at this early stage in the development process. But some of these I think are we can address with what our next steps are going to be, if not more. I remember, so in the first category, I remember hearing that the 45 is the max occupancy. That is the occupancy that's going to be for the building. So that's pretty set. Let's see, the parking lot minimum. So the city has a minimum parking requirements. And so 21's our minimum, and parking can be provided over that. So if there was a commitment to 17, that would be in conflict with our parking minimums. And also that comment is sort of in conflict with, you know, a lot of the comments from the community where we've heard that there's a concern that they don't want people parking on the road. So I think, you know, and we can talk about this more, but, you know, those two comments seem to be at odds, because I think by providing an adequate number of parking on site to meet the needs for the 900 square foot facility, which was approved, makes some sense so that there aren't cars parked on the street, because we definitely heard that that was a big concern. So, you know, I think having the parking on site and fully screened that meets the needs of that facility, I think could address any kind of fear of parking spilling out onto the roadways. And then, yeah, we have a lot of good questions about storm drainage and the sidewalk requirements. We actually have both Charles Kudlis with Jeffco County and Nathan Ank with the city. Both are excellent engineers. And so I'll, I guess, you know, speaking to, I guess we can kind of bundle those both together, because both were topics covered in the response to the request for relief. So I see Nathan's got his camera up, and Charles. Nathan, do you want to kind of go, or maybe actually let's start with Charles, because with sort of Jeffco, he's dealing with a lot of the offsite impacts, and then we'll go to Nathan, just talking about both the what's expected from the applicant as far as drainage, you know, what's going to flow, what will be allowed, if anything, to flow to be conveyed offsite, and then what sort of sidewalk requirements are expected. Charles?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nathan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles. I'm civil planning engineer with Jefferson County. So just a quick overview. We, you know, basically how this process works between governmental agencies. You know, the property is located within the city of Westminster, but the adjoining right-of-way as you probably all may already know, is within Jefferson County right of way. And so we, when an application comes in, a development application, to coordinate with other agencies, City of Westminster will send an outside agency referral to the county, and we basically review that. And then we look, so such as like the drainage report that gets submitted or the proposed improvements for the development, the county looks at those things, and really we're just looking to make sure that our regulations are being met, especially within the county right of way. The drainage is kind of a different, kind of a unique issue, but situation, but we do review our requirements, and then in certain instances we can either provide our recommendations or or in the case where we're talking about conveyance over other people's properties, especially properties within unincorporated Jefferson County, we would have an interest in that, and we then could require items there. So I think there's some confusion, I think a little bit of confusion on that. So there was a mention of the county is basically, the county and the city needs to be clear on whether drainage conveyance is going to be a requirement or not. So really, that is kind of dependent on the design, the drainage plan, which is, designed by the developer. The county, the city, we don't design the plans for the developer. They provide their plans to us, and then we review it and we tell them, well, this, whether this is meeting our requirements or not. So we can't necessarily require them to convey any water anywhere, but if they, in this case, the drainage plan, the current drainage plan provided a detention pond to address detention and water quality requirements. So with a detention pond, the idea behind that detention pond is you're detaining water, and you want to release that water, ultimately trying to match historical rates. So if this site were not developed, which it's not now, that's the historical drainage pattern that we are trying to match with. Now you're adding in all this impervious area, which is going to create, concentrated stormwater runoff. Ultimately, that all goes to a detention pond. And so the county requirement as far as conveyance is, okay, that detention pond is going to outfall somewhere. Like that is going to, that water that's being released at historical rates or close to historical rates needs to go somewhere. So the requirement as far as conveyance, where that comes from is, the county likes to see with detention ponds that outfall, that water is released to a nearby either major drainage way, or maybe if there were underground stormwater infrastructure such as storm sewer pipes, it would maybe drain into there. But really it's kind of dependent on the design. So the alternatives that are coming into play are, if there was not a detention pond, then the alternatives to address stormwater runoff in other ways, there are other ways besides detention. And so that's kind of where where it becomes I don't know, we don't know because the design may change. So I hope that kind of answers the drainage question. As far as like, if the design, incorporates a detention pond, and we want to see, that it would be the county requirement. The current plan showing that outfall to the southern property of this property, we would want to see how's that conveyed to the major drainage way. And if that is conveyed to a major drainage way, then obviously that's going to require some drainage easements, because you can't just, convey water through other people's property without their permission, right? So the county, the city is fully aware of that. And so, I hope that answers that part of the question. The second part, involving right-of-way improvements. So the applicant did provide, a request for relief from certain requirements that we like to see as far as improvements. The county processed that, we reviewed that, and we've already notified the applicant. They have our comments. Basically, the county staff is not supportive of the request for relief from providing sidewalk, which that kind of falls in with our template standards for streets. I mean, basically how the county operates for improvements is when a development comes in, the county typically requires that one half of the adjoining street that fronts the property, meets our template standards. So if it's a local street that adjoins the property, then we want to make sure that that half of the street meets our local street template. So our local street template, there are 3 different local street templates that the county has, but obviously they all have sidewalk. And so because of pedestrian connectivity and plans for potential trails along Balsam Street, the county would like to see sidewalk. And then as far as curb and gutter, we do support them not providing curb and gutter because just based on the drainage plans, it just doesn't make sense to have curb and gutter. And so for us to make it a requirement, it just doesn't make sense. If the plans were to change where maybe curb and gutter helped alleviate drainage issues, then maybe we would circle back on that. But based on the historic drainage patterns of the site, if you look at the contours of the site, the site generally drains from the northeast there down to the southeast, and that's kind of where that that detention pond maybe come from, that location. But since then, we've provided them comments for drainage relating to drainage concerns and to the request for relief. And so we're continuing to work with them to resolve those items. But yes, sidewalk we do want to see. And as far as what those sidewalks would look like, I think we would probably, speaking with the other county staff, we would probably want to see those sidewalk standards meet the same standards that CDOT would require. CDOT has M&S standards for sidewalk, curb and gutter, ADA ramps, all those items we would probably want those to match. So that was a very long-winded answer. I think I'm done.
Yeah, Charles. That was great. I mean, I think that for the most part, the city is, really in lockstep here now with the county. And now that we have, a really more flushed out scope of work, that drainage analysis and those right-of-way improvements can all be better flushed out in the next few submittals. The one thing that I do want to add that Mr. Thurston kind of brought up was this is absolutely being reviewed against the same exact standards of any development coming in the city of a similar scope. As far as imperviousness, increase in impervious area and items such as that. What we do shoot for is providing the water quality capture volume. Basically, what we want is to see that volume treated and then released matching or below the historic rates. So anything that this development is adding or incorporating that we're reviewing within the drainage report is going to be held to all those same standards as any other development here within the city. And as we move this thing forward, Charles, myself, and Nathan, we're going to be coordinating to ensure that we're enforcing all of the intricacies of this development into one plan. It is a little bit of a hard one to kind of sort through, and we understand that. And I think that as we develop the actual engineering of this plan and move forward into that, we're really going to see, or we're going to start to see some big improvements out there as to what we can accommodate, and as far as what we can push on a development this size. So we're playing with those, or we're judging those criterias against our stormwater drainage manual that's available on our website. So if anybody's interested in that, that's an available resource that we review all of these redevelopments against, to ensure that everything is kind of held to the same standards, on the same scale.
Right. Thanks, guys. A lot of good information there. So just kind of to wrap up, at least the sort of highlights of Mr. Thurston's comments. The third category was really about adding anything, as this project goes forward from the very early PDP stage and the site plan is developed and the architecture is further developed. It's pretty typical to have some changes to that. I know that there was a lot of attention paid to the sort of large gateway at the entrance. And so, I'll let the applicant speak to that. I'll let Will speak to that. But I can comment that as far as the sign code is required, our sign code currently allows small scale signage in residential areas. Same if you had a sort of like a small business, home office type thing. So we're really, after kind of hearing the feedback from the last meeting, we're still going to stick with the sort of sign code that's applicable here, something along the lines of what was shown in the presentation. But I'll let Will, if you could just speak to the sort of gateway idea and where your client is at this stage on that.
Right. Yeah. So part of the process, as we were kind of working through developing and discussing the entryway, it was proposed that, at some point they would like to have kind of a more traditional archway. We weren't sure if that was even feasible, but after Nathan's encouragement, to present it, get feedback, and then at least it gives the neighbors an opportunity to voice an opinion about it. So, in feedback from the neighbors and in discussion with Nathan, it seemed like it was probably difficult to go back and get that amendment put in to the PDP. And so at this point in time, we're kind of taking that off the table and just proceeding with the current PDP. And then any signage would just conform to the Westminster signage code for residential areas.
Great, thanks, Will. Yeah, I just want to say, this is kind of unique because we're having two back-to-back meetings to actually kind of see the proposal evolve, but this is exactly what we're trying to get. So that was very helpful feedback. We didn't put the sort of archway up there just to kind of rout everyone's feathers. It was really to say, to ask the question, is this appropriate? Is it something that you guys would like or not like? And we got feedback on that. And I think we've already sort of reacted to that in a short period of time and got that input. So that's exactly the type of input that we want. And we're trying to air any ideas now because this is really, the last sort of major stage to allow for that public input. So thanks again, Will, for answering to that. I think now we'll pivot to questions in the chat box, quite a few. And John McConnell, principal planner with the city, is going to read through them. And some of them I believe we've addressed. I was trying to sort of capture by having both of our engineer, our engineer and Charles with Jeffco answer that. Hopefully it sort of ticks some boxes or address some of those comments. I'll pull them back in if I think that there's questions in there that weren't really answered. And if we missed anything, please type into the chat box. you know, if we need to follow up on that, and we'll do that. So I'll hand it over to John. He'll start going through the comments and questions.
Thanks, Nathan. So the first is a comment from Dan Henderson. Why is the petitioner asking for relief from putting in sidewalks and gutters when we are all using the Overland Trail open space more and cars can't pass one another on 106th while we are walking there? And it's a safety hazard because of 106 being so narrow. The applicant is asking for relief from improving the roads, especially 106th Avenue. Most of the neighbors are now using the Overland Trail open space north of 106th Avenue and west of the petitioner's property. 106th Avenue is very narrow, and when we are walking down 106th Avenue, if there are cars coming in both directions, one must stop and pull to the side so the other can pass safely and not endanger the pedestrian. Once the meditation center is in full operation, the traffic will be dramatically increased and the safety of pedestrians is compromised. The petitioner must be required to widen the road along their property line and put in curb and gutter to protect the pedestrians.
Yeah, so that's a great question from Dan, who's you know, just lives just south of there. You know, I think you know, the request was made, as was the applicant's, you know, right to ask Jeffco for relief. It was really to a number of items, and one that Charles explained wasn't granted was the relief from sidewalks on both Balsam and 106. So we still need to vet out what those look like, if they're an attached sidewalk or sort of trail scenario that's detached. You know, that would sort of tie in with future plans for other trails in the area. But I think we've kind of addressed that. There will be sidewalks in some form. Again, we just started talking about this on Monday. So we're gonna vet some options that also you know, can work with the sort of overall drainage plan, as Charles was talking about as well. I guess, Charles, is there anything that you would like to add? I guess we'll keep moving. I think that pretty much answers it. Dan, if there's anything else that you know it isn't addressed, feel free to type in another question. Thanks.
Okay, the next is a comment from Marcia Hooker. With the expected snow over the weekend, it will become very visible that we have drainage issues already in the area. It was stated last meeting that no additional requirements would be needed for the temple, even though a large parking area will only further runoff.
John, can you read the next one as well? I think it's very similar, and then I see that Charles popped up. I think there's a couple drainage ones that you can talk to.
All right. And so the next one is from Dan Henderson. Site drainage is a huge concern and issue. In 2012 and 2013, the properties below the subject property flooded due to heavy rains. The homeowners in this area will make changes to drainage to protect their properties. The addition of this massive parking and people will only exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Charles expand, but there will be drainage improvements on site. So any kind of, there won't be any additional flooding, you know, caused by this project, but I'll let Charles and Nathan, if they need to add anything to their last comments. Charles?
Yeah, sorry, from the last question, I was trying to speak and I was muted. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So from the last question, they had mentioned curb and gutter as kind of a buffer. So I just wanted to point out, so curb and gutter, you know, it's not the purpose of curb and gutter isn't necessarily to provide buffer along streets. You know, that's mostly for drainage, to convey, I mean, usually streets are kind of used as open channels to convey stormwater runoff, you know, and that curb and gutter kind of provides that channelization of that flow. You know, there's no curb and gutter throughout this vicinity. For buffering, for protection of pedestrians along sidewalks. Usually that's why we see the detached sidewalks. So you'll have some grass buffering to kind of protect pedestrians from that traffic. But we typically use that, or we kind of see that more often on higher class roads like major collector streets, or you know, streets where you're going to see a lot more traffic. Maybe the speed limits are a lot higher. You know, these are kind of local streets, so you know, may not make sense. But yeah, so just to answer that. And then as far as drainage goes, I think I kind of spoke kind of to it already. I mean, basically the you know, the review of any development project that goes through, I'm sure, any governmental agency, that's the general big picture concept of kind of what we're kind of ensuring is that the historical drainage patterns are being matched as closely as possible with the design. And so that's why you have, you know, a detention pond or, you know, other design alternatives. So I don't know if Nathan wants to speak more on that, but.
Yeah, no, I'll jump in on that. And I mean, yes, I mean, there's obviously, you know, as the citizens out here have mentioned to us in this meeting and the previous one, you know, some background historic concerns in this area. And what is going to happen with the increase in this parking lot, this development is going to have to mitigate for that increase, treat for water quality, and then release those flows under the historic rate. So any improvement that they're proposing, they are going to be making the flows from that associated with that better than the historic condition. You know, what's happening elsewhere on this large site, you know, that is a historic drainage flow, and that's not really these guys' responsibility to solve on the downstream end. What they're going to do is they're going to do everything they can to improve what is currently happening there, and you know, make it that a little bit better. But they cannot go out there and solve you know, the sheet flow coming through their property that they're receiving, that's coming from the north, that continues through this property, that continues to the south, that ultimately ends up in that major drainage way. So you know, there's these background flows, these off-site flows that this site is also receiving, that are going through their site, you know, that are impacting the downstream folks. So you know, those flooding incidents, that the neighborhood is experiencing, you know, this property is also experiencing. You know, and to be, you know, frank and honest with the neighborhood here, I have 2 projects on my list to go and review during the snowstorm, because this is going to be a very good screenshot of what the real characteristics and the real nature of the flows and the runoff is, you know, in comparison to, you know, a report and some numbers. So you know, that is something that I am you know, personally going to be doing. You know, video, you know, send it to me. Love to see it. You know, that's gonna, you know, at least give us an idea as the city and the county as to where we have drainage and flooding issues, and where maybe it's not the developer that, or the applicant or the petitioner's responsibility to fix. And so this could be an opportunity for us to help engage with the neighborhood as well.
Great. Thanks, guys, again. I really appreciate that. That added some good extra color to your answers before. So John, yeah, you want to keep going from where we left off?
Yes, next comment is from Marcia Hooker. This is a meditation center with no expectation of growth. So why advertise with a large signage? The address and name should suffice.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, you know, thank you for that input. We do have a new sign code that's in place, and so we'll be looking to that to permit signage, which again is definitely is permitted separately from the building permit that has the ODP on it. So we'll be looking to that to the ODP to sort of lay out the location and dimensions based on what's allowed in a single family neighborhood like this, to keep it at an appropriate scale and one that other citizens in the neighborhood could put up by right. John?
Okay, the next is a question from Bernard Goches. And I'll give a shot at answering this one. We are concerned about the residential home being utilized as a business and entertainment for temple and meditation center. What measures will be taken to assure the home does not become the business building and use and hours of use? So it looks like there's a concern about the hours of operation. That kind of ties back to the other concerns about noise and other nuisances. Right now, the official development plan does not have any restrictions on the hours of operation. This is the kind of information that we would be interested in getting your opinion on. Bernard, if you could maybe add something to the chat later on in the chain, give us your ideas about what you think appropriate hours of operation would be that are conducive to maintaining consistency with your neighborhood, and we'd be happy to receive those comments. The next comment is from Dan Henderson. Dan says this does not fit in our neighborhood. No spires, no prayer wheel walls, and no signage. Another comment from Dan Henderson. Westminster completely disregarded the neighbors that reside in Jefferson County. You only look at the residents of Westminster. Next comment is from Shelley Goches. We are not interested in any signage of any size. Next comment's from Marcia Hooker. And it's a question, why road improvement on Balsam? There is no entrance or traffic that should be on this road.
Yeah, so I think Marcia's asking, why are we doing any improvements on Balsam? So again, we're hearing kind of comments on both sides that, there should be improvements to deal with, the increased pedestrian usage. And we're hearing that from a lot of folks. So I think both houses kind of address that we will be putting in some kind of, sidewalk or footpath along Balsam to, again, to more safely convey pedestrian and trail users, and there won't be an entrance on Balsam. It's proposed on 106. So I think that answers it. But Marcia, if I didn't get to it, please feel free to chat, to enter a chat again.
Okay, the next comment is from Dan Henderson. This will turn into a nightmare for the city and the residents of this neighborhood. Next is a question from Stan Mack. Why is overflow parking even allowed when only a set number of spots was approved and only 45 people can be there?
Yeah, so Stan, set number of spots was not approved. The PDP does not establish any parking minimums or maximums. The minimum parking is, as I mentioned before, required by code based on the number of people expected to be using or accessing the site. As far as overflow parking, it's really just a concept that we're in the early stages of talking about, because we've heard from you all and the community on multiple occasions that you guys don't want to see parking on the street, because we definitely heard that it's a narrow street, and that there's concerns for pedestrian safety. So the idea here is that when there is a sort of special event or something of that nature that might draw more folks, we're entertaining the idea. And again, we have to vet this through our engineering folks and our traffic engineer, just to see if there's, you know, a good solution that might allow some overflow parking on site, just for those occasional events, again, to avoid any situations that, you know, have been an issue in this neighborhood, dealing with the other temple that's down the street with people parking on the roads and making it unsafe. So again, we're just sort of, the overflow parking is a response to what a majority of folks in the neighborhood have commented on. And so that's why we are exploring it.
Okay, the next is a question from Dan Henderson. Will the applicant be responsible for paying for the police presence required due to this proposal? It's unclear to me what the police presence required would be if this is in relation to nuisance calls. I'm not sure that there is a mechanism to charge back a property owner for that, but Dan, we may have to check in with our police department to see if there's a clearer answer on that one. And also, if we've misinterpreted the question, please let us know further in the chat, and we'll try to clarify the answer. But it's likely going to require them. Yes.
If that's in reference, I'm just guessing that Dan might be asking about if there's a special event. And I know that you're familiar with the special event permit process. If there is sort of, I guess, maybe traffic management requirements, perhaps. I don't know. He might be asking that. I'm not sure.
If there were to be a special event permit required, that's the permit materials are reviewed by our police department. And the police works out any sort of details that they may have to be involved in, even beyond the approvals. I'm not sure if there is a charge for that or not. There is an application fee when one is required. But as far as any more detail on the police involvement or any kind of fees or charges involved with other services provided, I don't have the answer to that. You know, that's probably something that, and again, Dan, if we've misunderstood the question, please clarify it. And we'll probably need to reach out to the police department to get you that answer.
Great, thanks, Sean.
The next question is, where are the subtitles or closed captioning? Nathan, I think you might have an answer for that one. I know that the city's been working on certain provisions for accommodations for virtual meetings.
Thanks, Jenna. I did email you, I believe it was a week or two ago, directly answering this question. We're in the process of, our communications team has taken this comment very seriously, and we're trying to explore different virtual meeting software that might allow us to do live closed captioning, which is what you were requesting. Unfortunately, you know, given that request was just made a month ago, you know, we have a lot of, it's a large impact because we're also looking at ways to do it for city council hearings and planning commission hearings as well. And so they're working on it. We were not able to get that up and running or find a solution for this meeting, as I'd emailed you about. But there will be a, just like last time, I will send you a link to the YouTube recording for this, which has a closed captioning option. I apologize, it is not live closed captioning, but it's the best system that we have in place now. And I just appreciate your patience. You know, in this virtual meeting environment, it's kind of constantly shifting, and we're getting better at it. And we're looking to do that going forward to better serve our citizens. So thank you.
The next is a question from Ginger Railsback. I apologize if I mispronounced that, Ginger. Only the meditation center was approved. How can you say both temple and meditation are allowed? Nathan, can you clarify the permitted uses?
Yeah. As I said in my intro, the cover of the PDP lists the allowed uses. In addition to the single family home, the other use allowed is church use, which matches the granted antiquated wording that's in our current comp plan. We are updating that as we sort of speak now. But our city attorneys had us use that wording of church. It was the actual approved use. So the meditation center is really what is it's the sort of building that is being used for as a temple or for meditation practice. So whether it's a Christian church or a Buddhist temple, those all fit under our current definition of church, which is a permitted use. So I hope I've answered that one.
Okay. The next question is also from Ginger. What size will the trees be when first planted? The rendering shows more than 30 feet.
Yeah, Ginger, it's it usually in renderings they're kind of shown more toward further growth. But I'll let Will if you can kind of speak to the general size of evergreen trees. I can say that we do have minimum height requirements and sort of caliper inch requirements for those to establish screening at an early time and so that they're healthy trees. But Will, do you have a sort of a rough idea of what you're proposing for tree sizes at the onset?
Yeah, I admit that the trees that are there are older growth trees, but we're working with the landscape architect to design that, and the first draft does have a combination of earth berm and evergreen trees, and there is a minimum height for that screenage so that cars and headlights are blocked from the parking lot. So the ultimate design will be more opaque than even is shown in this image, especially at that 3 to 4 foot height. I don't know.
Thanks,
if that
Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does. And Ginger, also, just so that you know, these larger trees are existing trees. The ones that I think you can see my cursor that are over here on the right side, and there's a beautiful set of trees there now. I think Will's talking about the sort of addition of these other trees here and shrubs. Again, we're going to make sure that especially the parking lot area is screened so that no headlights are going to come through. Those bushes are going to take a little bit to fill out, but we'll ensure that there's a dense planning. We actually have a pretty strong landscape code that speaks to that. So thank you.
Okay, the next is a question again from Ginger. Concerning the signage, what does "for now" mean? What has to happen to change this? That was probably relative to something that was said along the time the comment was made, so I'm not sure exactly what exactly the question is referencing. Maybe some of the, maybe Nathan or the applicant might have an idea.
Will, I guess, can you speak to that? Did you say anything for now? We did say that we would be applying our new sign code to this project and making sure that it meets those requirements, and that the applicant had stated that he's not proposing to do an archway or anything, which even if that were to happen, which would take a PDP amendment, which they're not proposing to do, the signage on it would still be regulated to a certain maximum size and height. So I don't know. Will, do you think I got that, or do you have any other things to add?
That may be in reference to maybe the archway, and we're taking that off the table, but as maybe Nathan, you can explain better, any accessory structures that aren't currently on the PDP would have to go back through an amendment process. And we're not proposing that at this point.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that the property owner would have that right at any point to make those amendments. Whether they would get approved or not is another question. But you can go and speak to that better.
Yeah, well, you actually said it absolutely correct, so I don't have to add anything. If they do an amendment, that would need to, it could be approved administratively. I think something like adding another accessory use would be something that we'd have to look at if it was, I'm sorry, an accessory structure. And we've heard from this community pretty clearly that the archway is not something that's highly desired. So, we'd have to review that at the time it comes in, but right now it doesn't seem like something that that staff would be in favor of. But certainly the applicant could ask for that. And if we felt it was necessary, we could ask them to take the application through City Council to allow for public comment.
Right, next is a question from Mike Lair. There is a property that was recently zoned commercial on the corner of 108th and Dover Street. When this property is developed, will the city and county require concrete curb and gutter? If so, why is the city and county in discussions with this applicant to allow a dirt path? This is likely in reference to the southeast corner of Wadsworth Parkway and 108th, and it would be bounded on the east side by Dover. I'll probably defer this to Nathan Inc., but I can say there is some jurisdictional differences there. Wadsworth being the jurisdiction of the state, 108th, I believe, is the city's jurisdiction. But Nathan, you may be able to confirm the status of Dover and kind of how we would approach that project.
Yeah, I'll do my best here to answer here for Heath Klein. But we are evaluating that site at the pre-app stage, and we have identified a number of right-of-way improvements, and I do believe that curb and gutter is along Dover Street is something that we are pursuing with that, just in order for it to meet our cross sections and our typical cross sections as they're identified in our standards and specs. And so that is where we have landed on that at this time. However, speaking to the scale of that development and comparing it to this, there's a lot of other things that are going on with that development across the board with many different disciplines. So that is an ebb and flow kind of development and site that we're working on with that application and that applicant or that landowner really to see if we can get that that project moving forward. But at this time, there's nothing to really report on what's going to be there and how it's going to be developed.
All right, the next question is from Shelley Goches. You mentioned the most similar PDP designation was a church. Why would it not be considered a school designation given the applicant is a teacher? Shelley, I think Nathan's already addressed the permitted uses. This is considered, it's a religious organization, and the city views the land use as most generally characterized as a church, regardless of who the applicant is. Nathan, do you have anything else to add to this one?
Nope, I don't. I think you got it, John. Thanks.
Okay. Next question is from Ginger Railsback. When will road improvement be finalized? And I assume that means the construction of the improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of just broadly answer. Yeah, so Ginger, the sort of general layout of the road and the general grading will be, quote unquote, finalized when the ODP is approved. Now that'll just be a general layout. So the roads and the sidewalks, really just grading and the sort of bounds and what the sidewalks are made of. The next step in the process is these civil engineering drawings. And that's where really all the sort of details, the fine details will be reviewed by Nathan Enck on that. And also the ODP will be reviewed by Jeffco as well. And those will be constructed as part of the permit associated with those civil drawings. So those are the kind of steps. So we're just in the early design stage now. So we're taking all of your feedback and incorporating it going forward, making sure that both Jeffco's requirements as well as the city's requirements are met going forward. So thank you.
All right. The next comment is from Ginger also. No way is this consistent with the neighborhood. The percentage of use is not relevant in my mind. Next comment is from Shelley Goches. I agree with everything Ben stated. Question from Ginger. Will overflow parking be screened?
Yeah, Ginger, that's a good question. Again, we're just, we weren't even really exploring the overflow parking idea until we heard it last month from the last community meeting. There's no requirement in the PDP to screen any sort of overflow parking because it's not mentioned. We only talk about the permanent off-street parking requirements. And I think it's pretty safe to say that the intent of the overflow parking is not to, sort of formalize it. It would only be, and again, we still have to review this and vet it with various city staff. But the only, but I would not think it would be screened because the intent of true overflow parking would just be for the sort of occasional use, again, to prevent parking on the street, which we've heard is not desired and is more of an eyesore.
Okay, and this may have been answered, but Stan Mack asks, so where is the screening for the overflow parking then?
I think I just answered that. Mr.
Okay.
Georgie, I saw you come on. Would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say about the overflow parking. Yes, we have no intent to make one overflow parking, but in case, like, I also have a right to apply for special event permit sometime in the future. When that happens, before, in that case, to backup planning, and then we, as my neighbor kind of requested previously, saying that we should not park on the street, as Nathan earlier mentioned, in that kind of concern and that reason. So we thought, we want to make a backup planning if when we have special events with under special event permit. So then we also don't want to make anybody park on the street. So that way we want to respect what my neighbors requested. So in that reason, we try to prepare for the overflow parking since we have plenty of space. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's actually helpful. I probably wasn't clear in that. Yeah, the overflow parking wouldn't be something like we formalized on the ODP. It would just, again, as Mr. Georgie said, it would be sort of part of the, generally it's part of the special event permits, and John can correct me if I'm wrong. We may require some sort of parking plan, and in that plan could be a provision for overflow parking on site, again, to address the concerns of the neighborhood.
Yes, that's correct, Nathan. So the next question is from Ginger Railsback. Who does Charles and Nathan Inc. report to? Ginger, I can state that Nathan Inc. reports to Dave Losman, L-O-S-E-M-A-N. He is our city engineer. And Charles, I'll let you clarify who you report to, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I report to the Assistant Director of Planning and Zoning, Mike Schuster, for the county, and the Director of Planning and Zoning, Chris Chris O'Keefe.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Next is a comment from Vincent Harris. Both the county and the city should only allow normal public access pedestrian sidewalk that meets ADA standards is always required with public access ways. Why would the county and the city allow crusher fine style pedestrian path? That's inappropriate and expensive to maintain in years to come. Inappropriate suggestion to allow.
Hey, Charles, would you like to comment?
Yeah, so I think there's some miscommunication there. So the county hasn't approved any crusher fines path. You know, basically the status of the county's review of the request for relief from public improvements was, you know, that staff does not support not providing sidewalk. You know, that's the current status. You know, there was no approval of any kind of crusher fines path. I mean, I think that's kind of a question that the applicant had to the county that hasn't really been resolved yet. So, you know, nothing's been approved, you know, as far as crusher fines. And I think I mentioned earlier that speaking with other staff that, you know, as far as the sidewalk requirements, you know, we go by what our regulations state. And if you go to the Transportation Design and Construction Manual for the county, you know, we have our templates for local streets that, you know, we need to be met. Those don't specify the materials for the sidewalk or curb and gutter. So I think that's where the confusion came from when that question came to me. And, you know, I said, well, we'd have to look at that. But I did find in the Transportation Construction Manual, when it talks about construction, it refers to the CDOT M&S standards. And so that's why I mentioned earlier that we would probably be looking at the CDOT M&S standards, which I do believe that they do, you know, they do specify concrete sidewalks. And so that's probably what we would want to see. So sorry for the miscommunication. You know, I don't think there's any approval of any kind of crusher fines trail anywhere. I think we would want to see that that our requirements are met from, you know, as stated in our regulations. So.
All right, thank you. The next is a question from Dan Henderson. This is something the applicant should address. The question is, if the capacity of the 900 square foot garage is 45, what's to keep the applicant from having another 75 to 100 people outside watching the show on a TV screen? And I guess it's really a question of what are your plans outside of the meditation center? And would they include anything like Dan's suggesting here, a TV screen?
Yeah, Will, can you speak to that?
That's a good idea, but I think as we kind of discussed in the earlier in the presentation, we're talking with the city that 45 occupant capacity is interior to the meditation building, and then we're discussing with the city to try to define specifically at what point above that 45 person capacity would trigger the requirement for a special event permit. And that I don't think we have a clear 25 person is I believe the number, anything over 25 people is what triggers the need for a special event permit. So we're still trying to define that. And I don't know, Nathan, is that, will that be written into the ODP? I thought that you were talking that may be explicitly written into the PDP just for clarification for the organization and the neighborhood.
So
Yeah,
Will,
oh,
this
sorry.
is John. And Nathan, I could probably answer this. Yes, we want to continue to work with the applicant to define under what conditions a special event permit would be required. A special event permit at the City of Westminster was really designed to encapsulate various city departments' rules and regulations regarding everything from fun runs in our public spaces to street closures for parades and other events. As far as planning and zoning goes, what we look to is our section 11.417, and that's temporary uses on private property. And it's typically geared toward things like Christmas tree sales and pumpkin patches or carnivals or things like that that are temporary in nature, where something's being offered for sale, offered to be given away, including a good, a service, or amusement. So it's a pretty broad kind of activity that we're looking at there. Uses like temples, meditation centers, churches, and the like, the city typically doesn't require very often these types of special event permits for things that would normally go on at a church, like a picnic or whatever for their congregation. If the church, for example, or other similar organization was proposing to have a large festival, a big convention or revival or something like that, then that would probably start falling into the arena of the special event permit. So we'd like to continue to work with the applicant to really kind of hone in on what types of events that they anticipate they would have, the scale of them, and that would give the staff a little more insight as we move this forward as to what those thresholds should be. Ultimately, we would like to have enough clarity to provide some information in the official development plan to where all parties are clear, including the residents. So I hope that helps answer the question there. Next is a comment from Dan Henderson. The drainage issue is a grave concern to the neighbors to the south. Next is a comment, and I believe a question from Suzanne Kuhn. The slide rendered site plan reflects site key 11 as a water retention area, which appears to be a small pond with only a berm to the south. What is the offset to the adjoining property to the south? How will this be lined to ensure water is not seeping into the ground area? Given that this is placed direct north of another property structure, whose responsibility for damage should the retention pond fail? It sounds like a question for the applicant.
Right. So this was based off of the initial submittal as the ODP for the initial drainage plan that our civil engineer came up with, and we've since gotten good feedback from the city and comments about that drainage plan. And one of the comments was they were not keen on utilizing water detention area that was proposed. And so subsequently, we've been discussing utilizing various options on the site, and Nathan might be able to speak to it more, but they could include grass swales or rain gardens, various strategies so that we can avoid having to use water detention area. So that portion will likely go away, and we'll use kind of more integral strategies on this further up on the site as that water gets kind of taken care of as it moves. Nathan may be able to speak to that more.
No, I think that I mean, it's an ongoing design process that we're continuing to work through and ensure that there is no negative impacts downstream from the development of this property.
All right, thank you. I think the next question is about drainage as well. But again, I think Nathan's comments address it. It's a work in progress on what will be required for the final.
Okay. Yeah, the next was a question from Dan Henderson. If drainage conveyance becomes an issue to the neighbors to the south, can they build berms to stop the conveyance?
I think that's been addressed.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'm not sure how that question could be answered because I think conveyance of any drainage, when I think of conveyance of any drainage, it's that water that stormwater that's being released is either being piped through underground sewer infrastructure, or it's being conveyed through some sort of channel, some sort of swale, like grass swale or something, to ultimately to a larger reservoir, say, or a major drainage way, which is located to the south here. But any of that, basically to allow that conveyance to even happen, for that construction to even happen, there would need to be drainage easements that would have to be established, which would basically be agreements with those property owners that are crossed. Like I can't go and I wouldn't be able to go dig a swale on my neighbor's property without their permission. I need their permission. So there's no conveyance of flows onto your property without your permission, without some sort of drainage easement. So as far as the release of those flows, I think there are certain situations where we have detention ponds that outfall to an open area. Maybe it would be like the county's property. And then basically the intent of that would be that it would eventually infiltrate into the ground as it naturally would if during a normal rainstorm anywhere. The water would naturally infiltrate into the ground and dissipate and go where it needs to go. And so with that, maybe we would want to see like a flow spreader so that it would spread out any kind of concentrated flow to allow that infiltration to occur over a wider area. But I understand the concern with the property to the south, and I think so that's kind of where this whole these other design alternatives are being explored now, because we understand that any conveyance of water through the properties to the south is obviously going to require some sort of permission, some sort of drainage easement. Otherwise, the developers in their design, they're going to need to explore other options. So I hopefully that alleviates your concerns, and in knowing that, the county and the city, we do look at that. That is part of what we are reviewing. That is part of what our regulations are there for. So.
And if I could just comment quickly too, based on our last conversation, our design goal for drainage, and Nathan may be able to speak to it as well, is our goal, and what we'll be working with our civil engineer is to eliminate the need for offsite conveyance. So our design goal for drainage is to all development and drainage strategies will be kept on site if possible. And Nathan needs more information before he can kind of determine if that's possible. But in our conversations, it seemed like that's very likely that we can employ various strategies on site to eliminate the need of any off-site conveyance. Am I correct, Nathan?
Yes, absolutely. That's the goal.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The next is a comment from Bernard Goches. Now that we have the open space trails in, the next is a question from Suzanne Kuhn. What measures are in place to ensure that this does not become a mosquito infested area?
I guess mosquitoes aren't quite my area of expertise, but I think as we've talked about, I think the applicant has agreed, and Nathan's been suggesting some ideas for not detaining the water. I think that the real concern that comes up with mosquito infestations deals with a retention pond, and I might be stepping outside of my lane here, Nathan. So correct me, but there's no intent here to make a retention pond. And in fact, we want to really allow the water to infiltrate into the ground as quickly as possible. Hope I did it right there, Nate.
Yeah, no, and kind of to go off of that, the state law also regulates how long you can detain water. And so, looking at that, the water quality capture, depending on the type of infrastructure you're using, that retention time is a maximum of 12 hours with the products that we're exploring. So that is the amount of time that you'd have any sort of water before it infiltrated in or was dissipated across the site. So, in that amount of time, that's not something that we would be too concerned about creating an environment that would breed mosquitoes in the instances that were the alternatives that we're exploring for the ultimate engineering design.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Dan Henderson. How do we apply for a request from relief from the meditation center? Dan, it sounds like you may be asking how to potentially appeal the decision of the city council to allow the use. That could be the question. If we're wrong, please feel free to clarify us. I don't know that I have an answer on the appeal process of city council actions for you tonight. If we can, Jennifer, if you can just mark that one as to allow us to revisit that, and we can provide an answer and put that on our Q&As on the website. And Dan, I'm sorry if that's the wrong interpretation of your question. Please let us know, and we'll try to answer it more clearly. Next is from Suzanne Kuhn. In the last meeting, the comment was made that grassland to the south would be able to handle the water runoff. However, that land is not simply grassland, but rather people's yards. The city and county need to ensure the water drainage is not simply allowing excess water to ruin the adjoining properties. Thank you for the comment, Suzanne. Marcia Hooker asks why trails along Balsam. I think that's been answered. Am I correct when I say that? I think we addressed the sidewalk versus trails question.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Next is a comment from Shelley Goches. I would also like to see a berm to the north of the parking lot. Next is from Jana Railsback. We are not allowed to have a home business, so there are not signs in this neighborhood. Therefore, it does not fit into the neighborhood. Okay. Next is from Dan Henderson. Are you going to address any questions or comments, or are you all just going to pontificate? Yes, Dan, we're really trying to address the questions and comments. Please bear with us. Next is from Ginger Railsback. will the entire property be fenced as depicted? Good question.
I'll have the applicant address that.
I think, yeah, the intention is to provide some fencing along 106th and Balsam. There is restrictions on fencing heights within the front setbacks. So anything that would be proposed or finalized would conform to those requirements.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next is from Shelley Gochis. What are the dimensions of this unresidential looking sign? First, I'll just clarify, like Nathan said earlier, we haven't reviewed a sign permit yet. I think what the applicant's showing here is potential concepts that they believe would comply with our code, but it may be a good question to ask the applicant, the images that you're showing in your presentation, generally what size do you think those signs are that you may be proposing?
Right. Yeah. So that was just a kind of conceptual sign based on the Westminster signage code for a post type sign. And the requirements for that type of sign is a 6-foot height maximum, a total square footage of 12 square feet for the actual sign. And the sign needs to be set back, I believe 3 to 5 feet from the property line. And so that was a kind of a conceptual sign showing those parameters, so we could at least have a discussion about it.
All right, thank you. Next is from Jenna Railsback. At this point, you're taking it off the table, so pretty much in the future we will have to revisit this apparently. Jenna, I think that might have to do with possibly that entryway arch. Does anybody want to address this, or is it clear enough?
I think we've addressed that one a few times, so I think it's clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Vincent Harris asked Nathan, explain the sign code allowance in terms of size allowed, height allowed, setback allowed, and type of materials. Specifics, not general comments. Vincent, I'll jump in here for Nathan. We don't have the sign code in front of us. It's a brand new code. We're all just learning it right now. We'll be happy to review that and answer your questions with more specificity, but we just don't have that in front of us right now. It would take us a little bit to kind of go through it and answer your questions. We're happy to do that, and I think it's best if we review that against your questions and then answer them, and we'll publish those online with the other answered questions. And we apologize for just not having that knowledge off the top of our heads tonight, but it's a brand newly adopted ordinance, so we hope you understand.
Yeah, and Jennifer, if you could mark that one as well. I haven't written down, but yeah, we'll get the exact code citation for you, Vincent. So you can have that for what's allowed in a residential, a low density residential area such as this.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And next is from Shelley Gochis. If you don't know the size of the sign that is proposed, what are the limitations set by City of Westminster for size of signage in a residential neighborhood? Yes, Shelley, we're gonna answer those questions, especially in terms of specificity that Vince has outlined above your questions. So thank you. Next is from Jenna Railsback. You never addressed the fact that there is one bathroom with all those people. What are the city requirements for this? Nathan, you might have some insight into that from our initial building division review. Do you have any insight into that? I know we don't have anybody from our building division here tonight.
Yeah, it's a good question. we did review that like a year ago, so I'm trying to remember. Will might be able to help, but certainly the as this garage is being converted and changing use, it will have to conform with the International Building Code as far as ADA access. So certainly the bathroom there will need to provide ADA access, and the number of stalls will also be required, will be governed by the IBC. I can't recall exactly what the requirements were for 45 people. I don't know, Will, do you have any recollection if there's a bathroom that needs to be added? It's just been so long.
I believe I believe under 50 for this occupancy type only requires one ADA, one restroom that also has to be accessible, and that's what we'll be proposing. Proposing at the building department submittal. Those details will be fleshed out per the IBC during those submittals. But yeah, that's what we'd be proposing, just one accessible restroom.
Okay, great. Thank you, Will. That sounds right.
Okay, the next is a question from Mike Lair. It's regarding I think we've already answered this exact question a little bit earlier. It's about the curb and gutter on 108th and Dover, the commercial development. Looks like a repeat. And this next one is the same thing. Okay, so we've answered both or that same question already earlier. Thanks, Mike. Vincent Harris asks, your answers to these questions say the answer was verbally said. I assume you and staff will also write the answers down to provide a record of the answers, correct?
Vincent, this recording will be provided. So whatever questions are answered in this meeting will be provided via that link to a YouTube a site that will be posted to the project website, and I'll be emailing all of you who've been participating tonight with that link. Any questions that we've skipped over, or not skipped, but we couldn't answer tonight, there were two that I have so far, as well as any questions that we don't get to. It looks like we're running up on time. We're about 5 minutes away. Anything that's left over will be a written answers to those comments and questions will be posted on that same webpage. So again, within probably a week or two, depending on the complexity of the questions, those answers will be posted to the site. But otherwise, this recording will serve as the documentation of the meeting.
And Vincent, I just copied and pasted the URL for the project status webpage that Nathan mentioned for this case, and that's you can use that link, and that's where you can get to the recording of this meeting. Next is from Bernard Goches. Is the city pushing for any amenities for the community? We want this to blend in with the colors of the community, similar to the Walmart and Evergreen. Looks like it belongs as an example. Toning down the exterior colors will help community acceptance. I think that's probably a question really maybe the applicant can help answer there. I know that the architectural design and color had some significance to the use, so it may be helpful for the applicant to help address that as well. And yes, the city does want to try to strike a balance in fitting in with the neighborhood character, but also we do recognize that based on what we've learned from the applicant, some of the architectural features and maybe some of the colors may have some significance to the use. So I'd like for the applicant to address that.
Yeah, Rinpoche spoke to this a little bit in the first meeting, just the significance of the colors shown are not arbitrary. And so I'll defer to him to quickly just touch on the significance of the colors as they're shown. Rinpoche, could you speak a little bit to the design and the color?
Hello. Yes. Earlier, I have mentioned about a little bit on that color. Yes, the color is very important for like Tibetan Buddhism. Red and yellow presenting the love and compassion and wisdom. So kind of every different faith have their own different ornaments on their churches and temple. So just like that, we have those kind of color thing. And then this whole explanation, if you, it will be a long kind of explanation right now if I try to give you, but I can give you, if anyone who are interested, I can actually, as earlier Nathan mentioned, I can put everything, post on that website or anywhere you want. I can put that there as a solid record so that you can read. Yes. Then also in the end, before this whole event end, I would like to say some words, but not, I want to wait a little bit. So yes.
All right, thank you. The next is a question from Shelley Gochis. The applicant, or comment, the applicant may not be responsible for dealing with the historic flooding, and this property 8200 has not flooded. The additional hard surfaces the applicant creates will add more flow to the neighbors to the south. The next is from Stan Mack. Hours of operation should be 0. We are not allowed to have a home business, so there should not be any others allowed. But since this is obviously favoritism, and we had no say, then Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with no weekend events. The next is from Jenna Railsback. It's just a statement, go Dan, with lots of exclamation points. The next is from Suzanne Kuhn. In relation to the answer given for Stan's concern of overflow parking, your response is 21 spaces minimum based on code for the expected occupancy. Is the occupancy limit going to be held at 45 as stated when the council approved? And I think that occupancy is for the building, but if the applicant would like to address that, please feel free to.
Yeah, that 45 occupant maximum is just a straight calculation based on square footage and use. So that's an explicitly explicit number that comes directly from the code. So that's where that maximum occupancy for the meditation building comes from.
Great, thank you. So we're running up on time. It's 8 o'clock right now. So again, thank you all for your comments tonight. I've just put up my contact info on the screen. Again, here's the URL for the project status webpage. I'll also email that out to you all. And on that page, again, we will answer. There were a couple questions earlier that we couldn't answer without some further research. And it looks like there's about 10, 15 or so questions that we did not get to tonight. So we will be posting answers to those to the website within a week or two. And again, I appreciate all of your input tonight. This has been helpful once again. We have a lot of input here, and we will take your input and incorporate it into the future submittals of the official development plan for this project. So again, thank you all for coming and showing up tonight, and have a good evening.
Hello, Nathan. I'm sorry. Can I say a few things for? Give me 1 minute. Is that all right?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I would just try to go quick. First, I just want to say that there are lots of questions. I was just keeping some notes, which are some important for me to say. And then thank you very much for this time that having their own names, that all those who asked questions, that was very helpful. And then, yes, I will follow and honor the law of this land, and also whatever the decisions the city officers they make, I definitely hold in my heart and I will follow. And then whatever the rights, if the city officers and then the law of this country give me as a citizen of this land, citizen of this country, I will fully exercise my rights as my human right and religious freedom. And also, there were some comments I have seen, I haven't seen, but I have heard somebody told me, saying there are lots of people who probably get a misunderstanding, thinking that I'm a Chinese or something. Somebody comment as a Chinese restaurant, some stuff like that. I want to tell you very clearly, I'm not Chinese, I'm a Tibetan. But, so I'm also a citizen of the United States. So this is not a restaurant, and this is our Buddhist temple, church. And also, many questions came, the sign. And then in one hand, if the city is giving me, saying that, okay, this is church, and then this is something like a business or industry, accordingly, I have to put this kind of sidewalk, and so all these kind of requirements, then it come on me. And then likewise, I believe I will have the right to put, every churches have the sign, so why not a Tibetan Buddhist temple should also have the sign too, since that's kind of also, I feel like very fair to have me the kind of right to put the sign of my temple. And also, yes, church, temple, meditation center, that all means the same thing for a Tibetan. So that way, this is temple. And also, lastly, I want to say, now all these difficult times is past and gone. And then thank you very much. And also, there are some number of people from my neighbor reached me, and they are very much kind of interested to know me more, or they want to have some time cup of tea or something like that. That gesture was so beautiful, that really touched me. And then generally all my neighbor, I know we are all human. It's only just we have some misunderstanding. We want to know more each other. And I'm just like you, one of you, and then we will be very good friends in the future. And then if few people who have difficult time, I'm so sorry, I cannot do anything, but I have to follow whatever the law gives me the right, I must do that. And then whoever wants to like kind of in the future open with making friendship. Now pandemic is over very soon, and I'm really excited to meet you all sometime, and we will be very good friends. Thank you very much for everybody, and then we all have a good night and sweet dream, and also may all this pandemic be over and healthy and happy for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Georgie. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.